I'm here with Brent Paker, founder and managing partner of Vizion Capital, a micro PE firm first focused on blue collar enterprises. Welcome, Brent. Thank you for being on the show today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so everybody that watches the show, they know what my first question is always going to be kind of your origin story, man. You were born, mom had you, you roamed around, and then all of a sudden you find yourself on a mergers and acquisitions podcast. How did you get here? How did you end up on my show today?
All right, well, a lot of groundwork there to cover, but I'll try to keep it brief. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. Um, well, so I kind of come from a family of entrepreneurs. I think I like to give credit to my grandpa. It all started back with him. He grew up in the Depression, and he started selling outboard motors in a Cadillac dealership in Nashville, North Carolina. So that was kind of the genesis of the Parker entrepreneurs. Um, he moved to Orlando, Florida, opened up a boat dealership there. My dad took over the boat dealership. That was in our family for about 90 years. And so boating was just part of our lifestyle. Um, I have two other brothers that are also in entrepreneurship. So our family rule was you had to go to college and make mistakes with somebody else's money before we came back and made mistakes with dad's money. So I was in college and my dad actually sold the business. So then I kind of had to chart a different path. So I got my accounting degree. I went and worked for Deloitte doing taxes for high net worth, for privately held companies. A lot of times you can get stuck on a big public company, but I positioned myself to work on the private companies so I could get exposure to, 50 or 60 different companies a year. And that was awesome. Learned a lot and gained a lot of experience there. And then I found it was time to go, and my brother found out about this Freedom Boat Club franchise. So I looked into that, and I was like, man, that's cool. And he's making a lot more money than I am and having a lot more fun than I am. So I quit my job, sold my house. At that time, we were living in Houston, Texas, and moved across the country to Virginia, a state that I'd never been to before, but thought it was a good idea to open up a business there. So we took a little bit of a risk, rolled the dice, and you know what? It was awesome. It worked out for us. So we moved to Virginia in 2017 and started a Freedom Boat Club franchise there. And I think the franchise told me that I was the fastest ever onboarded franchise because I was so excited. And luckily I had connections already in the industry. So I was able to source boats and find employees and sign a lease with a marina, and we were off. So so I did that for 5 years. We grew. That business model taught me a lot. We bought boats direct from manufacturers. I had a team of mechanics and dock staff and captains that would train people to use them, maintenance the boats, wash the boats, take care of everything on the back end. And then we would just sell a membership. And that was our revenue model. We'd sell a membership. People would pay an entry fee, monthly dues, and then they had unlimited access to our boats. And it was a franchise network, so they could use boats anywhere in the country too, which was kind of cool. So when we're talking to people, like, yeah, you could, spend $100,000 on a boat, or you could, pay $350 a month and use our boats, and use boats in Florida, use boats in San Francisco, use boats in Boston. Like, where are you traveling? Let's go boating. So it was really cool. And one of the things, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but one of the really cool things I learned was the power of a recurring revenue model. So anyways, did that for 5 years. And my family, my wife and I and kids, we thought it was time to move a little bit closer to family. So we moved back here to Utah. And so that kind of led for me exiting the Freedom Boat Club franchise in Virginia and entering into this micro private equity phase where I'm buying and selling blue collar businesses.
That's
which
awesome.
Is really fun.
Now, where was this in Virginia? I actually I lived there for a little while, but just because I was in the military, I was stationed there for a few years.
Oh yeah, so we actually had 4 locations by the time we left, between Woodbridge all the way down to Richmond. So
Yeah.
we had 2 in the Potomac River, one out on Lake Anna by Charlottesville, where UVA is, and then one in downtown Richmond, right in the heart. It was so pretty. So
Yeah, I was actually at Newport News area. I was at Langley Air Force Base. And then
oh, cool.
I hung out a lot down at Virginia Beach because it was about a 25, 30-minute drive. So, yeah, I was out there for a few years. Then I lived in Hawaii for 3 years after that. So that was cool. But so you went from, you're entrepreneurialism in your blood. You get out of college. Dad's already sold the business. You start this recurring revenue model, franchise based. What made the shift from like, okay, I'm gonna buy a franchise that has systems, processes, and everything already together, to creating a micro PE firm where you're buying blue collar businesses, which in many cases, depending on the size, may or may not have such well developed standard operating procedures and everything. So what made the shift there? Is that just something that came available, or?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, the franchise for me was a great first business. I learned a lot, right? Because you're kind of riding on the coattails of people that have been successful at it before you and giving you a game plan. So that was part of my education. And once I had learned that and felt confident in running a business and all the different facets of business, then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go search for industries where there's opportunities to implement these things that I've learned. And blue collar is one of those kind of like gold mines for opportunities. You have a lot of business owners that are tradesmen and not like refined business minded people. So they're really good at a couple things, but as far as marketing, selling, and scaling a business, they might fall short just because they don't have that background or that exposure. So, yeah, so that was it. We wanted to go and try taking the things that we learned from the franchise model and putting it into this blue collar space.
Now, micro private equity firm could mean a lot of different things. That's a really broad phrase. What exactly is it you guys are wanting to do? Are you investing in companies? Are you acquiring them? And then, I mean, tell me a little bit more about what your plan is.
Yeah, that's a great question. So micro private equity is really the best title that we fall in, but even within that, there could be differences. So the basics is we look for companies that are 5 million in acquisition value or less, right? So that's our target. When you get over 5 million, you start to get sophisticated money that's looking at those companies. But most search funds, PE funds, they have minimums, which are either 5 million or 10 million. And so we figured, hey, if we stay under that 5 million mark, we can find some pretty good businesses with some pretty good value and make some good money. So our strategy is kind of a roll-up strategy. We'll go buy 3 or 4 of those sub $5 million companies and roll them up and then have a $10 or $15 million company that we can grow and sell off. So,
Okay. So the objective is to kind of, I would hate to use flip because it's not an overnight thing like a piece of real estate or something, but you're buying them, bolting them together, and then having an exit event, in a set period of time.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Cool.
So we're looking at probably 5 years. I mean, that's our barometer for what we need to get done and how we need, by the time we need to build it, it needs to be 5 years. So that way we can start looking for
Yeah. I
next.
kind of expected it to be 3 to 5, right? Three at the earliest, 5 would be normal. So yeah. So let's talk about a little bit about like, are you looking anywhere or is it just in your local area?
Yeah, right now we're predominantly looking in Utah. The first market we entered was water softeners.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of PE activity around HVAC companies because these PE funds have found that they can go into a business that people have viewed as transactional in the past and make a recurring revenue model out of it with service contracts. And charging $100 a year to 20,000 customers, you're making a lot of money, right? And
Right.
when that's contractual, there's a lot of safety in that and investors like that. So water softeners is one of those areas where we think it's similar. There's an opportunity to go in with a broad range of customers, get service contracts going, and create a recurring revenue model.
Awesome. Now, so water softeners. Now, I live here in Oklahoma, and I don't know too
Yeah, you
many
probably
people
don't
that
have
use
one.
them. Right. It all depends. Like, I think you live in an area where there's a lot more stone and a lot more like minerals in the water, so that's what it's about, right? It's
Yeah.
basically about neutralizing the heavy minerals in the waters. Now, is that a filtration system or is it adding something to it?
Yeah, so we kind of do everything. So like water softeners is our bread and butter, and that essentially takes out the hard water spots and makes it so that you don't get that staining on your glass doors and your dishes and your appliances and stuff like that. But we also do water filtration. So we'll do reverse osmosis filtration, which is like equivalent to bottled water that you can have right from your kitchen sink. We do well water treatment and stuff like that. So
Awesome. So you're still, the interesting thing is you follow the theme, right? You notice you're still messing with water, right?
yep. No, that's what when people ask me the connection, I'm like, well, I'm still playing with water. So
Still playing, still playing with water. Um, I'm really curious about this. You seem to make that shift pretty easily. Now I'm doing the same thing as far as like, I'm moving to be closer to family, my wife's family. We moved here to Oklahoma of all places to be closer to my family. They're gone now, been gone for a while. And like I was telling somebody earlier, like, how soon are you moving? Like, well, my wife quit her job today, so we're moving pretty quickly. Uh, we've got movers coming to get things and everything. But you make the shift up there. How long do you think it took before you actually just like, did you already have a business set up there, or did you move and figure it out?
yeah, so I did it all kind of backwards. So I bought my business before I sold my franchise, and it was just because the opportunity came up. I decided I wanted to. In my last business, I was the sole owner, and then in my next business, I had two good friends from college that are really sharp that I wanted to partner with. And so, the one friend owns a valuations firm, and he had a deal that he valued where the buyer backed out, and they had developed a relationship. And the seller came to him and said, "Hey, do you know anybody that'd be interested in buying my business?" And then that's where he introduced me. We kind of put our partnership together. I've been pitching my two friends on this idea for a couple years now, and it all moved pretty quick from there. So
Awesome. Now, a micro PE firm, um, uh, I think that just tends to be, the size of deals you're doing, that 5 million or less, right? It doesn't have
mhm.
anything to do with how big you're going to be on the other side. So I had Ace Chapman on here, and he's real big into that. I was telling you this before the show. He does the micro PE where he does a small raise, $3 to $5 million, goes out and buys things. Now, when you say $5 million, is that the acquisition price? So it could be an EBITDA company of, it could be as far as like a $2.5 million EBITDA company that you're looking at, or is that the revenue size that you're looking for?
Yeah, so typically in this industry, you'll find a 3 to 5 times multiple on earnings, sellers' discretionary earnings. And so yeah, that's essentially what we bought. We bought an $800,000 EBITDA company at a 4 multiple, and
Okay.
that was under our 5 million mark.
It's interesting. A lot of the guys I talk to, and I follow, I've interviewed a bunch, and I also follow a couple of the mentors in the space, and they're pitching over and over again. If we pay more than 3x, we're overpaying. So, unless there's a couple very select industries, software as a service, things that already have built-in recurring revenue models, kind of the theme. They go for that 4x, 5x, and stuff. So I can get that. So that's not too far out of a line. Cool.
Yeah.
Um,
And
tell me.
also, it's
Yeah.
kind of about the negotiation, right? If you want to find out what's important to the seller, for our seller, um, it was the multiple was important. So I said, okay, we can give you that multiple, but we're going to work on the base. And so we kind of did some things to knock the base down a little bit, and I think we ended up in the same spot, but we ended up in a spot where actually we were happy and the seller was happy. So it was a good fair deal.
Well, that's the name of the game, right? Just a lot of people think this is a game of numbers, and you're trying to buy EBITDA, or you're trying to buy a revenue stream. And if you only look at it that way, you're missing this out. And this is a common theme for most of the last 4 or 5 shows where I talk about it anyway. It's the human element of this, right? You said something very important there. You were happy and they were happy. And that's that. These deals fall apart so fast if one party's trying to get what they're trying to get and not hearing out the other party. So I love that you adapted, right? He wanted a certain multiple. You're like, okay, you can have that multiple. And it's kind of the old school rule of, he who sets the term, the other one sets the price. So it's if it's my price and your terms, or your terms and my price, right?
Yeah.
So that's normally the rule of like the default rule of negotiations. So I've had guys where like, you know, I want $1 million for my business. Like, okay, how did you come up with that? It's not exactly how I said it. Like my number one response is always going to be, cool, let's see how we can get you there. Because most of the time, by the time they throw out a number, you don't even have your due diligence done, or even have the deep enough financials to know whether or not it's a good number. You can have your suspicions, but it's not too uncommon in this space for somebody to come back with a number when you ask them what they're looking for. And it's because when you ask them how they came up with the number, oh, my financial advisor said that's what I need to retire on. So it's not even connected to their business, right?
Right.
In your
Right.
case, you have a friend who had a valuation company. He valued the company, and were you at that valuation or close to it when you ended up at the end of the deal?
Yeah. So I was a part of the due diligence, and I mean, he had told me what the valuation was prior to us entering due diligence, just as a means of like, hey, this isn't the right size that we're looking for.
Hmm.
And then what we did was we essentially delivered an LOI with a formula. So we said, hey, we'll do, this is our formula. It's kind of a weighted average seller's discretionary earnings. So we took 50% of 2020, 25% of 2019, and 25% of 2018, just to kind of eliminate any effect or mitigate any effect there could have been up or down due to COVID. And then we'll give you a 4 multiple. And so as a result, we had a really good baseline. And then when we got into due diligence, we drilled down, found that exact number, and then that's what the purchase price ended up being. It wasn't like we threw out a number, hey, we'll pay you, $4 million. We kind of laid out a formula, which I think is a little unique, but it ended up working well with this seller.
No, I like it just because it opens up. It opens up the opportunity during due diligence to find something and have that number shift, and it kind of puts them on notice. Like, look, oh yeah, uh, instead of saying I'll pay you, say your revenue is or your EBITDA is $1 million, and I'll pay you 4x. I'll pay 4 million. You just say, if your letter of intent says we'll pay, um, 4x the audited EBITDA, and here's the criteria for what goes into that. That makes a huge difference, because then if they have brokers involved or other people involved and things were added in or adjusted that just don't make sense, and it happens a lot more than most people would imagine. If you're not an acquisition entrepreneur, just understand that a lot of times things are added in or moved around to make the number look bigger than it should be. So that gets adjusted out when we see it, right?
Yeah.
So I love the idea of putting that in. One of the last LOIs that I sent out was that way. I just put a formula in there mainly because I didn't have their books were so bad. I did not have the information I needed to make the number. So, and I really wanted the business, and I already had a forensic CPA team that could put the books back together the way it should. So it appeared to be something good there. So I wrote it up as like something like, look, we're gonna, same thing. We're gonna give you we're going to clean up your books. We're going to make the adjustments we're going to need. And we're both going to agree on it, that's what it looks like. Oh, I lost you for a second. We're going to both agree that that's what it's going to look like. And then I'm going to pay you a certain multiple on that finished number. And then they agreed beforehand verbally, and then we put that in the LOI. So it might be a little more common than we would expect, just because it's just logical to do that. So tell me a little bit about, like, what are you learning? Like, how long have you been doing this now? You've earned the private equity. I didn't look at I should have pulled up your profile ahead of time, looked at your LinkedIn to see when you started Vizion Capital. But how long has Vizion Capital been around?
Yeah. So we're at our year anniversary this month.
Awesome.
So yeah.
So you've been at it a year. You've made at least one acquisition, right? And you're out there looking for others. What are you learning out there in the space that, like, man, I'm glad I've seen this now before I do my second one? Or is there any valuable lessons you're picking up along the way here?
Yeah, I mean, valuable or not, a couple of lessons that I'm learning is one, when you go in and acquire a company, you got to go at the pace the team is willing to let you go, right? So there's existing employees with existing processes, and as the buyer, you obviously see opportunity, right? So that means change. You see changes that you want to come in and make. But what we found is to have all those ideas, but then let your team help you set the pace. Because if we had 10 ideas and then just tried to ram it down everybody's throat, we'd lose all of our employees, and then we'd be stuck with a business with brand new owners and brand new employees. And those employees have a wealth of knowledge that we want to keep and utilize. And so we kind of have to leverage that and also go, go at their speed. So that's been one of the things that I've learned is go at their speed and and then but as a result, we've been able to maintain 100% of our employees. It's been pretty cool.
It's interesting. I did a whole series here where I did Meet the Mentor, where I actually interviewed a bunch of the guys that mentor this space. And more than one of them, I asked them, like, when you buy a company, how fast do you make changes? And more than one of them were like, I don't change anything for the first 30 days. And then I make a list of things. Like on day one, I know I've got 10 things I need to change. And then I keep those noted. And when I have meetings, I ask questions that would say, hey, I see this as an issue. How would you guys like to solve it? And he said very often they already know what needs to be changed and they suggest it and come up with things that are on my list and I could just check them off and it's on them, like, because it's something they've been wanting to change or do something differently for a long time. And the previous owner was doing things the way they've always done it. And he goes, but if I don't do it that way, um, I have more problems than I create solutions for. So I love that concept. One of the guys gave me a horror story where he bought a company and it was like one of the companies he had now. So it was kind of a bolt on where they buy, like you would buy another water filtration company, it would be a bolt on to what you already do. Right. And you would have some synergies. And the first thing he did is like, well, I don't need 2 office managers. So he let the office manager go at company B, the one he just bought. And the whole place almost fell apart because come to find out, not only was she the office manager, she ordered everybody's supplies. She booked everybody's travel. She was the executive admin to the other VPs and execs there. She did basically, she was more of a general manager than she ever was a office manager. And like things just started running out. People couldn't know how to book travel. They didn't know where their accounts were. They couldn't ship anything. She had all the shipping codes and stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So, I get just kind of acquiring the business and then observing and making changes at the pace that the team can go. Is there anything else that you've picked up, in this first year of doing this?
Yeah. And also as a follow on to that point, you don't know what like IP or intel is kept in the minds of the employees versus written down on paper. So if you go too fast and run off some of your key employees, there could be a significant asset of the business that leaves with that employee. So that's also important and that's kind of what we've done is gotten a system that was dependent on people and paper. They were very paper dependent to be, software and automated. Still using the same people, but it made their job easier and it got all the processes kind of out of their brains and into a system that will kind of live on beyond them if they ever choose to leave. So
Now you guys call yourself a PE firm. Did you actually go out and create like a private placement memorandum, do a round of funding, raise funds? You guys pitch in your own money, of course. They always require that, but or are you guys using things like the SBA and leverage buyouts and that type of stuff?
yeah, that's a really good question. So we just used our own money and then got an SBA loan. So self-funded, and eventually we might need to go out and raise funds. But I think for the first few acquisitions, we'll probably be able to maintain it just internally with the partners.
Awesome. Now, how did you like the process of the SBA loan? Because I heard closing. I had one of the guys on here. That's all he does. He was actually last week. We talked to a guy who he facilitates SBA loans, and even he said closing one is an ordeal.
Yes. No, it's terrible. Like there are many other things in life I'd prefer to sit through or endure than an SBA loan application. It was pretty miserable. Luckily, my business partner that does valuations, he's really good at paperwork and all that kind of stuff. So he carried a large part of it. And then my other partner is an M&A attorney. So he was also able to help us out there. But man, no, it was difficult and it was slow. But it was, in my opinion, it was worth it. Well, I don't know. If somebody had private money and offered me 0.5% more without all the paperwork, I probably would have taken that. But we got a good interest rate. And, the money came through, so it's one of those things. Once you've gone through the ringer, you kind of forget some of the bad. But yeah, I remember, it delayed our closing. I flew out. They said, okay, we'll be ready to close on the 14th. I flew out to Utah. I was still living in Virginia. And geez, I mean, it was 2 weeks later, I had to postpone my flight. I brought my family with me. I mean, we were out here just because they couldn't get it closed in time. So
It's always the case. That's interesting. You said you'd paid more. I had a real estate investment group, and somebody said, "Well, how many bank loans do you have?" I was like, "I've never taken a bank loan. Why would you do that?" I said, "They take too long to close. I'm buying foreclosures. Once the bank says yes, I have like 30 days or less to close." Right? I've seen a lot of short sales and foreclosure type of sales bust because like I bought a bunch of them, as a matter of fact, that bust because the banks failed to close in time, right? So
yeah,
I used to train the local closing companies around here. Hey, I've got money lined up. If you've got a deal that busts, call me and I can close within 4 to 5 hours if you can get the bank to say okay, right?
yeah,
I just wire them, and it wasn't just my money. Somebody said, well, how much you paying your investors, like people who loan you money to buy the houses? I said between 9 and 10%. He goes, but you can get investor loans at 6 or 7%. I was like, all day long. But then I got to wait 45 days and half my deals are gone. So I
yeah,
laughed hard because in all the years I ran my real estate investment group, I never took a single bank loan ever. So
yeah,
as funny as all the real estate I own, I've never had a mortgage that was mine. Right. To this day, I paid cash for the house I live in, which is just a little farmhouse. And we primarily travel around and live in a tiny home when we move. So we have one of those too, which we paid cash for. But I've never taken a formal mortgage. It's always through private lenders and through raising money and stuff. So I totally get that concept of stuff. I'd pay a point or more or a half a point or
yeah,
more, not to have to deal with it. And sometimes there are deals you're going to run across, and that's a good thing to put out there because that you're willing to pay a little bit more for an investor because somebody might hear that. There are deals that if you try to do SBA on, they're going to bust. You run into
yeah,
a 75-year-old company or 75-year-old business owner who has medical conditions, and you tell him it takes 4 to 10 weeks or 4 to 12 weeks for a SBA loan to close, he might choose the next buyer. I've known more than one broker friend that have said, "Oh yeah, it happens all the time."
yeah, yeah. And it's so funny that you say that. I mean, a friend of mine had a small deal. He was selling a business for $150,000, and the buyers were getting an SBA loan, and it took them literally 6 extra weeks beyond what they said. And they were going on a big vacation to Hawaii. They filed the paperwork. They signed the paperwork, depending on the closing of the loan, and they thought that was going to happen while they were out on this month-long vacation. And man, they were back home before it closed. So and yeah. Anyways, yeah, there's something to speed
Yeah.
of capital. So
Velocity of money, right? There's something to the speed of it. So if you're listening out there and you're thinking, I'm going to buy a business, I'm going to use an SBA loan. That's awesome. Do it. And I got people that can help you out doing it. Just understand whatever you think it's going to close at, add about 6 to 8 weeks onto it. Cause just to be safe, it's very possibly going to have, 6 to 8 weeks at the end of you jumping through red tape. The other thing you want to know inside of that space, and I'm sure that you're going to personally guarantee everything you got against it.
yep, no, absolutely. I mean, my house has a personal guarantee on it. No, they love to tie you up with personal guarantees. So, and if
Yeah.
you're new to them, it feels really scary. But as when you've been in entrepreneurship for a little while, you kind of get used to them. So
It's funny is
that's
I'm resistant to it. I mean, everything I own is in trust and everything else to protect it and make sure it's safe. And like if something happens to me or whatever, one of the business I own, it can't bleed into the others. So to personal guarantee across multiple trusts and LLCs and stuff would absolutely terrify me. And I've been in this space for a while.
yeah. Well, no, you look a lot smarter than me, so I'll try to take a page out of your book.
It's the old guy with the gray beard, and I would doubt that we have about the same education level. I have a master's degree too. You went to probably a better school, but I wouldn't put that on me at all. Um, let's just talk about the whole process here. What is your search criteria and how are you going about looking for businesses? Because there's a lot of guys out there listening to the show. They haven't acquired their first. They're really wanting to, and they're just trying to figure out. I know how you acquired that one. It was a referral. But what is your process or your game plan now to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to go about it. But right now, for me, I'm in an industry. I've chosen it, and so now my next business. I'm just going to call the business owners. Right. I'm going to look up on the internet. I'm going to Google water softener companies, and I'm going to call every one of them. and see who's ready for a deal. And I'm going to prioritize by a few criteria that I can see online. But yeah, that's the way I'm going to do it. And anybody could do it realistically that way if you've picked an industry. A lot of times people have a hard time picking an industry right off the bat. And so my advice then is just network, right? Network with business brokers, with lawyers and attorneys. These are all people that are going to be having conversations when business owners are ready to sell or thinking about selling. And so networking is a great way to find business opportunities as well. As I've networked, I've had a bunch of opportunities come my way, and not that I've taken all of them or many of them, but as you network, they start to flow. So
You know, don't overlook LinkedIn. I tell you what, we did a roll up last year for marketing agencies, and we sourced um, every single one of them. I say every single, about 95% of them were sourced through LinkedIn, and in a matter of less than 200 days, I always say around 200 days, but it was like 187 if you want to get technical. I guess it depends on who you ask when we started sourcing, but there's a little variance there. But I hate when people call me out stuff, so I end up correcting myself a bunch of things. It only took 150 days, or whatever, but somewhere in that. So none of the numbers I say are factual or accurate. I'm just guessing here.
just a
But
disclaimer there.
there's my disclaimer. But we talked to, I have a stack of over 200. I think it was 211 marketing agencies in that time frame, and it was all sourced through reaching out on LinkedIn to markets. And you've got to remember, marketing agencies are predominantly on LinkedIn because they're using it, right? So they're easy
Right.
to reach. Now, water softening companies, I just did a search while we were talking, and it includes all their employees. But I'm personally connected to, if you know how LinkedIn search works, because you only get to go to your first, second, and third. I'm personally connected to 6,500 people who have water softener in their title somewhere, right? So it might be a CEO of a water softening company, or this one, like the one I'm looking, water softener engineer, general manager at CO2 water softener. Like, I've got a bunch of these people in here, but that's huge in the fact that you could go, hey, we just acquired one world. The comment is you can make connections inside of LinkedIn, like you're networking, and just start with a very soft approach. Hey, we bought one. We want to be connected to other people in the industry. We'd be willing to acquire others. Who do you know? Type of thing. And I would be surprised if you couldn't connect to, probably, if you reached out to every one of these guys, 6,500 of them that I see, and not just that phrase alone. I would be surprised if you don't get at least a 30 or 40% just connection rate, where you're connected to the industry at that point. And then it's just a matter of just keeping the word out that you're on the prowl, right? Because
Yeah.
everything changes with time and circumstances. It was my favorite saying inside of the real estate business, and it still holds true here. Somebody might see your post, and I've had people, I tried direct mail, I tried a bunch of other stuff inside of the space, and people respond 4 or 5 months later. They write down your name, your number, your information, because they're thinking, I don't want to sell now, but man, I might. And then they start jotting that information down, right? I have notes around here um, of people who, like, I caught something on their LinkedIn. So, I might sell this soon. So I reached out to them, like, yeah, not quite yet. So I got notes on my CRM says, call this guy in 6 months, right?
Yeah.
But same thing goes here. I honestly think you could have a big one, a big connection. The other thing I would suggest, and just because I specialize in finding stuff, I have friends that I'm finding stuff for, and that's kind of what I do. I find businesses, and this one of the reasons the show exists is so I get opportunities brought to me. The other one is going to your industry. Uh, like, if I'm looking for manufacturers in Oklahoma, there is a Oklahoma Manufacturers Association, right? I guarantee there may or may not be a water softener association, but there's some type of manufacturing association similar to it or connected to it. And you get in there, you get connected, you start talking to the people in the industry, and just keep the word out. That's like, I'm looking for other opportunities in this space, and they'll be there. So,
Yeah. No, networking is huge. And yeah, it's as you also introduce the idea to people, even if they weren't thinking about it before, once you introduce it to them, they're not going to forget it, right? And that's what happens. You plant the seed. A year later, that person is probably going to be ready as you keep nurturing that seed.
Now, if you're looking at this and you're looking at like, I'm going to buy other water filtration company or water softening companies, are you also looking at also water filtration or other products along that line?
Yeah, so I think we're going to be selective with things that are either residential or commercial that we can have service contracts for. So, water filtration is great because we need to go change filters, every 6 to 12 months. Water softener, same thing. We need to go do, resin cleaning and, check the settings and things like that. So those are the things that we're going to focus on. So, but anything within that spectrum we'd be interested in.
I just like to brainstorm ideas, and this is a fun avenue to do that. What about pool service companies? If you think about it, they have filtration systems, right? They're for sale everywhere. You can buy pool routes, like the cleaning the routes and stuff for a
Yeah.
1X. You can buy these routes up for 1X. They're all over the place. That's one of the only ones I've ever seen that predominantly sell for 1X revenue. So a pool route's generating, $150,000 a year in revenue, and it's I said 1X whatever, but it was 1X seller's discretionary earnings. Let's say it's pretty profitable. These things are pretty profitable. So that, at 150,000, they're probably doing 120 to 130 in their seller's discretionary earnings, and you can buy it for 120, 130 all day long. And then they're just all over. They're represented by brokers or personal. But if you think about it, it's service contract, it's water. There's filters and other systems to put in place, and then it's pretty easy to upsell them. Hey, the water we put in here is pretty hard. You need a hot water softener before we put it in through this chemical system, right? Like you're killing your filtration because the water's too hard coming into it. So it might be a cross sell and upsell event. So that's one thing I was thinking about, and the other thing is would you consider buying one of the manufacturers of a product you use in your supply chain, like the filters, right? If you bought the filter producing company or the wholesaler that wholesales the filters, one of the things to expand on businesses often would be like to look at your suppliers. Is that something you would be
Yeah.
interested in?
You know, for me, I'm open to all ideas, but we have kind of a thesis, we have a goal. And so
Hmm.
anything that falls within that, then we'd be interested in entertaining. So essentially, we're interested in rolling up and creating an opportunity by taking a transactional business and converting it into some percentage. I understand it's not going to be 100%, but some percentage of a recurring revenue business. So anything within that, we'd be interested in entertaining. And if a manufacturer did fall into that, it would be, we'd grown to a much larger scale and we would capture huge efficiencies by doing it. I think we kind of view the end in mind. Hey, how's this going to help us sell sell the company or the companies? So,
I've got two spaces I'm looking at. One of them is home services. I own a local pest control. I always bring it up here just because it's one of the things I do own. But other home services, like your water softener company, would be considered home services. You could, and I'm a big fan. I'm from the real estate world, so I'm also a big fan of recurring
yeah.
revenue. Creating that. So, like I have a lot of my clients in that pest control company are like Airbnb clients, and we go check. We do an inspection and a cracks and crevices touch up almost
Hmm.
monthly on a lot of them. Just we go in and inspect them for bed bugs, and then since they have people moving in and out, we'll hit the cracks and crevices. Um, you know, uh, just on a monthly, and we have a bunch of those guys at $89 a month. So same thing with some of the other home services would definitely be easy to convert. A lot of P&E firms are out there buying up, which is I think in the last 2 years it picked up a lot. Things like landscaping and lawn care type of stuff. So when you
Yeah.
say recurring revenue, private and commercial, are you open up to all those other areas or pretty much around the water space?
Yeah. So right now we're kind of proving the concept. And that's the thing. So we're going to stay laser focused in this water softener, water filtration company. But if you and I talk 10 years from now, I would anticipate that we have 5 different sub industries doing the same, roll up strategy,
Okay.
from concrete to pesca, whatever it is. That's so we're starting small, we're learning ourselves, proving out our theory, and then we're going to start taking it to other industries and other sectors.
Oh, cool. That's what I was trying to figure out because the way you explained it before, I was like, maybe he's talking about going into just pretty much a broader anything I could turn into recurring revenue around home and commercial, but you are sticking in the water industry. So, um, what am I missing here? There's got to be like there's water filtration, water softeners, maybe the pool thing. I'm not sure if that even plays in
Yeah.
there. That might
I
be
mean,
a stretch.
you can add other product lines within the portfolio, um, water heater, like tankless water heaters, or the water storage tanks. Those are starting to be big. So we could extend into other product lines like that. And in the state of Utah, I have like a specific subcontractor license, and so there's actually a lot of things that fall under that license category. But with my license, I couldn't do like plumbing or electrical, and I could hire somebody like that and use their license.
Right.
Um, but so, anyways, yeah, there's a handful of different products within that subsector that we could expand into. So, but I'm also a big fan of like specializing, doing one thing super well. And that's just because I feel like when a lot of people enter entrepreneurship, they want to be Walmart. They want to provide groceries, socks, shoes, and hunting equipment. And it's like, look, you're not Walmart. You've got to specialize and do something really well, or else you're going to just, you know, you're going to take up all your bandwidth and you're not going to do anything well. So that's also my philosophy, is just do something really well. Do something really well, be the expert, and you'll make great money at it. And, there'll be other opportunities to expand into, socks or hunting equipment or basketballs, but, do those later with a different LLC. Don't try to do the everything model.
I love it. That's curious because the way you explained it at first, I was like, is he gonna have like two or three roll-ups he's putting together, or or is it just the water? So we got that cleared up. Cool. Um, I'm just kind of just we keep diving into this thing, but tell me about you're talking about. You've already talked about like business networking and that type of stuff. Do you already have other like acquisitions lined up, or um, I've been trying to think how.
Yeah, no, good question. So and that's kind of what we did. We have a list of potential suitors that
Mhm.
we're going to reach out and call. We haven't called them yet, but we're getting close to that phase. So if any of your listeners do have a water softener company in Utah, please feel free to reach out. um, no, yeah, we've created our list and we haven't done it yet. We really want to try to prove the model first with this one. My brother, who's also an entrepreneur, he said he has this phrase, scale or nail it before you scale it, right? So that's what we're doing. We're nailing it right now, and then we're
Yeah,
going to start scaling it.
I'm really intrigued by the whole thing. It's kind of the whole water filtration is what got me into this space of all things. The weird thing is a story about it, right? So I was doing a real estate thing. I hired a performance coach who, because I thought I was getting burned out. I couldn't tell if I was really early stages in the foreclosures drying up, and I was like, usually I'm pretty good about making shifts and finding new customers. And I'm like, is the market really drying up on me, or am I just getting tired of this and getting burned out on it? So I hired somebody to help me kind of shake my own cobwebs out. I'm a performance coach. And he said, Ron, it's like you should be playing a bigger game. Then after he ruined me, man, for real estate, because every time I close a deal, I close a flip on a house. It was like 40K or so, and that not to me, but to the business, into the bank. And that wire would come in, I'd look at it and I'd hear his voice in the back of my head, but you should be playing a bigger game.
Yeah.
And then one day, I'm a big fan of digital marketer. My master's or my MBA is in marketing. So I'm listening to Ryan Dice, I think who it was, on Digital Marketer, and he's talking about a company they bought. They're doing acquisitions, and they bought a water filtration company, and it was all industrial filters. And they realized that industrial filter was the same size and shape as something used in the residential side. So they rebranded it, sold it to those guys because they could produce it better, and then they put them online and did a bunch of other stuff and just grew this thing crazy. He took a brick and mortar company that done certain things a certain way for a very long time, came into it with a fresh set of eyes, and just grew it like mad. And that's what got me into the space. Is like, I like that idea of taking something that, is 30, 40, 50 years old, keeping the employees there and just opening the doors to, hey, what else is possible with what you got here?
Yeah, and that's what's cool about coming into an industry or something that might be a little more, I guess, archaic or manual labor. My brother's business. he was he was selling boats for my dad, and he was like, he had to, I think his story was he was at the movies with his family, and a brokerage deal came through, and he had to leave the show because he knew it was going to take him all night to put the paperwork together, and he was like, man, what a pain. And he created a tech company that now, like 95% of all, used boat market uses his software to close the deal. And so there's other plays too. We're doing recurring service contracts within water softeners, but there could be a software play. There could be a parts play. There's a smart device. There's a bunch of different things if you have an open mind when you get into these things.
I bet there is. You think about it. So I came from, if you looked at my background, I came from the tech industry before and running huge data centers. And the cool thing about even back, and I'm going to date myself here. I moved here in 2007, so that was the last tech job I had, right? And even back then, the big servers and equipment like EMC equipment and stuff, they actually had a phone line, built into them, and they would call out for maintenance. So we would be working, and all of a sudden the EMC repair guys would come here and like, we're like, what are you up to? And like, oh no, our NOC knew it. Like I didn't potentially know, but our network operation system was aware because they see in the alert, but they didn't bother because they knew EMC got the same thing, would send their tech over. But this thing would send an alert out to them, and they would come up, oh, you've got 2 failed drives on disk tray 3, and they would just show up with everything to fix it. We let them in, they'd fix their stuff and leave. Now that caused a problem once that I don't want to butcher EMC over here, but let's just say there was one point where they fixed the wrong thing. We had EMC CEO on the phone at 3 a.m. Trying to put a team together to fix what they broke. Anyway, but that's a software play you could do inside of these water software softener company. Have the system call out when the filtration system is when the filter goes bad or something. Yeah. Anything could go wrong inside of those filters, right? If you think about it, 50 yards down the road, the city decides to fix the water system. They dig into the line. If you ever notice what happens, like here, at least here in Oklahoma, anytime the city's working on the line, you got to open it up, and all of a sudden you get like muddy water looking coming out of the system. You got to run for a little while, right? And they'll send out warnings and stuff. But there's all kinds of stuff that could take that system down and make those filters go bad early. And having a software play inside of that would probably be cool. So, some type of what do you call it? There's a name for it where there's not lights out management like on the old school computers, but like intelligent device, something that could censor the water flow or something, realize there's something wrong.
Yeah. No, I love it. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities like that. So,
what are your what is your biggest concern if somebody called you today and said, I've got this company, it does, in your space, it does water filtration. We've been around for 10 years. What would be the type of things you would be wanting to know from that owner right away? Well, are there other buying criteria other than, numbers that make sense to you?
Yeah, team and culture, right? So I'm a big believer in building the right team and also the right culture within your company. So especially in this industry, you just want to get a chance. Team and culture are going to fit with the existing team and culture that we have going. Because what you want is when you do a roll-up, you want a cohesive company. You don't want these independent companies, or else it doesn't function as well. So, there's other outside factors that we would look at. Market reach, size of the customer database, and web presence. Like that's a big thing nowadays is Google Ads. When we bought this company, they had 7 Google Ads, and one of them was terrible. And I said, hey, you need to fix that before we buy the company. And I was like, honestly, I would spend up to $3,000 to fix that Google review. Like, go do it. And so anyway, he did it. He called him, and I don't know, cost him $100 of sending a tech out there to deliver some salt or whatever. And the person changed the review, right? So, and then we've been focused on that. We've gone from 7 reviews to now over 260 reviews on Google, 5-star reviews. So you look at web presence and things like that.
Awesome. So brand identity is what I would call that. Like, what does the market see the brand as? And if you've got 7 reviews and one of them's bad, right? That's not good in either sense. And neither would be, having it'd be harder, I guess, if you had, 100, 200 reviews and 30% of them are bad, right? As not now you've
Right.
got a chore. So
Yeah,
you
you're gonna have
want
to work a lot harder.
yeah. So you're wanting companies that are just like the rest of us, right? Yeah, they're well run. There's systems and processes in place. Not that they're perfect, but they're there. Is there a certain size? Like, I know what the monetary size is, but like I always say, I'm looking for companies with 10 or more employees, just because I found through the search and talking to business owners that before that stage, I'm pretty much buying myself a job, right?
Yeah,
When the owner leaves, they're wearing 3 hats, and there's not enough people there to pick up those hats, all right?
right. We're definitely not interested in buying a job. That's kind of a phrase I've learned a long time ago is, own a business, not a job. And with this, buy a business, not a job. So it would need to have a team that can take care of the job and get things done. Because, we can roll them under our umbrella, but we want them to have the wherewithal to complete the task without having to plug in, myself or one of my partners.
Now, doesn't if you're going to use the SBA again, doesn't the SBA actually have either a limit on number of loans you can have concurrent, and or a time limit for in which, like, from one to the other?
Yeah, good question. So the SBA has, I think, a $5 million per person limit. So depending on the size of the acquisition, we would reach that cap in 2 or 3 deals. But also another avenue that we could pursue is owner financing. I don't know if you've ever had anybody talk about that on the podcast, but
Oh, we talk about it a lot. Most of the guys yeah, absolutely. Most of the guys I'm working with, and these acquisition entrepreneurs, that's their first avenue, right? The first avenue isn't go down the path of SBA. The first avenue is see how much, if anything, the owner's willing to finance, and pay a little bit of a premium if they are willing to.
yeah, exactly. Because if you own or finance, from the buyer's perspective, you're going to save a lot on fees, right? Even if you are paying an extra point
Yeah.
to the seller, because for our SBA loan, you pay, I don't remember what the premium was, but between 1% and 3% as your closing cost. So, there are fees associated with it that you don't have in an owner financing deal. Valuation, expense, you can read it. It's like a menu from a restaurant, all the things they charge you for.
Cool. I have a resource for you on that. I don't know if you're familiar with, but I got to give them a shout out anyway because they featured us 2 months in a row. Have you checked out or seen the Acquisition Aficionado magazine?
No, I need to.
So I'll send you a link to it. But it's a digital magazine, and this month there's an article in there by Carl Allen, which is a mentor in the space, and he's talking about why business owners should and how to have the conversation of why business owners should do owner finance as opposed to take a lump sum from an LBO or a leverage buyout, and it's talking about how they're taxed and how that all plays. And it's a pretty, I'd say it's 5 or 6 page, maybe even 10 page article, but he explains it step by step on how to have a conversation, why it's to their benefit and everything. And that's with the Acquisition Aficionado magazine. But shout out there. We are in there, so it's kind of one of those. They didn't sponsor us or anything, but the guy, I know the owner now. His name's Lynn, and he's a great guy, and it's a great magazine. They have some good articles in there, but there's something in there for you. Read that if you can get your hands. I'll send you a link to a free copy of it. But read that article by him. It'll actually help you with that conversation.
Yeah, please do. No, that's for sure. A lot of things, a lot of people don't anticipate the tax benefit, but when you own or finance, you actually get to defer the gain. So you only get taxed as you receive payments. I did that with my previous business. And so now that gain, rather than getting it on my tax return all in year one, it's spread out over 15 years, right? So one of the best tax strategies you can do is a deferral strategy.
Yeah, and the other thing he touched bases on, I was like, when the owner gets that lump sum, so you do an LBO and he gets a check for $2.5 million or whatever he's going to get check, he gets hit with taxes, and then what is he going to do with the money? He's going to stick it in something, right? So he sticks it into a money market account, hires a manager, he has to pay management fees on it, right? So if you really look at the total economic impact of taking a lump sum, it's greater than just the taxes, to where a lot of these business owners, the whole reason they're putting it in that money market is they just need it like a $10,000 a month retirement income. He calls it the
Yeah.
annuity close, I think, or something to do with like annuity close. And it's like, look, they're trying to build an annuity for themselves anyway. So just give it to them as part of as part of the transaction. So I think it's a brilliant method. So I'm going to study it and use it during my next conversation, because I think
Yeah.
it's both beneficial to me, of course, is it's reserving capital, keeping the powder dry, so for other deals, and it's beneficial to the owner. And quite frankly, the cool thing is if you find something the due diligence and everything drops a lot, because you can word it in your contract to say, hey, in the first 90 days, I've done this a couple times. In the first 90 days, if I find something, it's just like you got skeletons in the closet you didn't, tell me, I can unwind this and hand this back to you, right?
Yeah, you can be a lot more creative in your deals when you do an owner finance than when you do the SPA. The SPA has rules, like you can't do, you know, earnouts or things like that. Where hey, if we're able to achieve this growth within the first year, you get this earnout. If we're able to achieve this growth, like SPA won't go for that. It's like we want a price, and that's what we're lending on.
Right.
But if you owner finance, you can even build it in. Hey, we know what, we're not going to pay you what you want. What you want, we're going to pay you this. But hey, you can have the opportunity to make that if we can grow and hit a certain earnings next year. So you can have some more flexibility to negotiate as well.
Man, I just looked up at the time. Wow, we're at 56 minutes already. We are at the top of the hour. I do need to make sure everybody knows how to get a hold of you. It is Vizion Capital, spelled with a Z, Vizion Capital. But if you want to reach out to him, I'm going to turn on his LinkedIn profile link. It is Brent Paker on LinkedIn, and it's linkedin.com/n/Brent L. Parker. And is that
Yep.
an L? I'll make sure that's an L, not an I.
Yep, that's an L. Yeah, Brent L. Parker.
Okay, cool. So that's how you reach out to you, man. One of the last things we always like to finish the show on is the same question that we do everybody. What can myself or my audience do for you, man? Is there something we can help you with?
Oh man, what can you help me with? You know what? This is kind of a crazy one. I already said, if anybody's got a water softener company in Utah they want to sell me, then reach out. But that's pretty narrow. I think your audience is a little more broad. How about share some gratitude? Share some gratitude with the people that work for you and work with you, because I'm so grateful for my team. They're the reason that I've been able to accomplish what I've been able to accomplish, and people need to hear it. So share gratitude with those that work for you and work with you.
I think a lot of people really underestimate the power of acknowledgement and gratitude. Just acknowledging another human being for the contribution they make towards you is amazing. And in saying that, I want to thank you, man. I want to thank you for being on the show, taking time out of your day, providing your knowledge and your information to our audience. And I really do appreciate that. I know that you got your own businesses to run, you've got your own path you're trying to lead, and you took time out of your day to share that with our audience. And I want to thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Awesome. I'm going to end the show, hang out for a few seconds afterwards. And thank you, everybody, for listening today. And that's the show.